She will cool off by morning. That was what Caleb Whitmore said after reading the last goodbye his wife would ever send him. He was standing on the rooftop of the Vera Club in downtown Chicago, 32 floors above the street, with a glass of bourbon in one hand and his future wrapped around the other. The city lights glittered below him like everything in the world was still under his control. Beside him, Sloan Mercer laughed softly, her blonde hair tucked behind one ear, her white blazer catching the blue light from the bar. She leaned close enough for people to notice, but not close enough for anyone to accuse her of anything. Caleb liked that about her. She understood appearances. His phone buzzed against the marble table. One message. Ariel. I'm leaving tonight. Goodbye, Caleb. For half a second, something moved across his face. Not fear. Not guilt. More like irritation, the kind a man feels when a smoke alarm chirps during his favorite song. Sloan glanced down. Everything okay? Caleb locked the screen and turned the phone face down. My wife is being dramatic. He said it so easily that the men around him chuckled. One of them raised his glass. To freedom, then. Caleb smirked and lifted his bourbon. To focus. Across the room, a photographer snapped pictures of the celebration. Whitmore Systems had just closed a major investor dinner, the kind Caleb had been chasing for years. The kind Ariel Brooks had helped him prepare for so many times, back when he still said we instead of I. But tonight, Ariel was not in the room. And for Caleb, that made everything cleaner. No uncomfortable questions. No quiet looks from his black wife when he took credit for things she had built. No reminder that the company people praised him for had once been held together by her late nights, her spreadsheets, her instincts, and her patience. By the time Caleb stepped out of the elevator into his penthouse at 2:47 a.m., he expected the usual silence. Ariel asleep, a lamp on in the hallway, maybe a cold dinner covered in foil because, even angry, she always cared. But the apartment felt different before he even turned on the lights. Too still, too empty. His shoes echoed on the hardwood. The small brass bowl where she kept her keys was gone. Her sneakers were missing from beside the door. The framed photo from their first office opening had been turned face down on the console table. Caleb frowned. Ariel. No answer. He walked into the bedroom and opened the closet. Her side was almost bare. Not messy. Not rushed. Bare. The hangers were lined up like she had taken her time. His mouth went dry, but pride stepped in before panic could. He laughed once under his breath. Unbelievable. Then he saw the kitchen light. On the island, beneath the soft glow, sat her wedding ring, a signed divorce packet, a black hard drive, and a cream envelope with his name written in Ariel's careful handwriting. Caleb picked it up slowly. Inside was one note. You ignored my goodbye, so you do not get to hear the truth from me. His jaw tightened. For the first time all night, the penthouse did not feel like something he owned. It felt like a room waiting to testify against him. He plugged the hard drive into his laptop with the annoyed impatience of a man who still believed he was about to prove his wife had overreacted. A folder opened. Then another. Emails. Drafts. Contracts. Strategy maps. Early product models. File after file carrying one name he had spent years leaving out of the story. Ariel Brooks. The first document on the screen was titled Whitmore Systems Original Growth Framework. Under it, in smaller letters, were the words, prepared by Ariel Brooks. Caleb stopped breathing for a second. Outside, Chicago kept glowing like nothing had changed. But inside that apartment, his perfect life had just cracked open. He thought Ariel had left him memories. She had left him evidence. Before the glass offices, the investor dinners, and the magazine covers, Whitmore Systems was just 6 people crammed into a rented room above a sandwich shop on West Madison Street. The heating barely worked in winter. The conference table wobbled if anyone leaned on it too hard. Caleb used to joke that the company had more unpaid invoices than employees, and back then Ariel would laugh because she believed struggle was just the beginning of something beautiful. She was 31 when she married him, already respected in the startup world as the woman founders called when their companies looked successful from the outside but were quietly falling apart inside. Ariel could sit with a messy spreadsheet for 10 minutes and find the leak. She could listen to a sales call and know exactly where the customer stopped trusting the product. She had a calm way of seeing what other people missed. Caleb used to love that about her. At least, he loved it when it helped him. Late at night, while Chicago buses hissed through the wet streets below, Ariel sat beside him with her old silver laptop, rewriting pricing plans, cleaning up investor slides, and turning his big, scattered ideas into something people could actually buy. "You make it sound smarter than it is," Caleb told her once, rubbing his tired eyes. Ariel smiled and slid the laptop back to him. "No, I make it sound clear. There is a difference." He kissed her forehead that night and whispered, "I could not do this without you." She remembered that sentence for years because, slowly, he stopped saying it. The first real investment changed him. Not all at once. That would have been easier to notice. It started small. In meetings, he began saying, "I decided," when the idea had come from her. During interviews, he said, "I built this company from scratch," while Ariel stood just off camera holding his extra notes. At launch events, men in Navy suits shook Caleb's hand and told him he was a visionary. They glanced at Ariel only long enough to say, "Your wife must be so proud." She would smile politely, because correcting people in a room full of investors felt petty, and Ariel had been raised not to beg for credit. Her mother used to tell her, "Let your work speak." But nobody had warned her that some men will take your work, lower their voice, and make it sound like theirs. By the second year, Caleb had moved the company into a sleek office tower with glass walls, espresso machines, and a view of the river. Ariel's name was not on the door. It was not on the website. It was not in the founder story his public relations team polished for business magazines. When she asked about it one night over takeout noodles gone cold on the kitchen counter, Caleb sighed like she had asked for something childish. "Ariel, you know what you mean to me. Why does everything have to be official?" She looked at him for a long moment, chopsticks still in her hand. "Because official is what people remember." Caleb shook his head. "I'm trying to build something serious here. Please do not turn this into a marriage fight." That was the gift he had for making her pain sound inconvenient. So Ariel swallowed it. She swallowed the missed dinners, the forgotten thank yous, the way he introduced her as "my wife," but introduced Sloan later as part of the leadership vision. She kept showing up because she thought loyalty meant staying even when nobody clapped for you. But every time Caleb stood on a stage and erased her with a smile, something inside Ariel grew quieter. Not weaker, quieter. And years later, when Caleb opened that hard drive alone in their empty penthouse, every file had a date, every draft had a name, and every forgotten version of the truth was waiting for him. The first time Sloan Mercer walked into Whitmore Systems, she did not raise her voice, did not make a scene, did not do anything obvious enough for Ariel to call cruel. That was what made it worse. She arrived 10 minutes late to a brand strategy meeting in a white blazer, nude heels, and a smile so polished it made the glass conference room feel colder. Caleb stood when she entered. He had not stood for Ariel in months. "Everyone, this is Sloan Mercer," he said, one hand resting on the back of the chair beside him. "She is going to help us sharpen the company image before the next funding round." Ariel looked at the empty chair near Caleb, the one where she usually sat when he wanted her notes, but not her name. Sloan placed her leather folder there without asking. "Hope I am not stealing anyone's seat," she said brightly, glancing at Ariel just long enough to make it sting. Caleb laughed. "No, you are fine." Ariel pulled out a chair near the far end of the table. The metal legs scraped softly against the floor, and for some reason that small sound embarrassed her more than it should have. During the meeting, Sloan spoke in clean, expensive phrases. Founder energy, market confidence, masculine leadership. She praised Caleb's instincts, nodded at his half-formed thoughts, and turned them into slogans before anyone could question whether they made sense. When Ariel gently pointed out that their smaller clients were already feeling ignored, Sloan tilted her head. "That is sweet, but we are not building a neighborhood service brand. We are building a category leader." A few people smiled. Caleb did not look at Ariel. He looked at Sloan like she had just given him permission to become the man he already wanted to be. After that, Sloan was everywhere. In Caleb's office with the door half closed. At investor dinners. On late calls, Ariel was no longer invited to join. Her perfume lingered in the hallway outside Caleb's conference room, soft and expensive, another reminder that Ariel had become a guest in a company she helped save. The worst moment came 2 weeks later at a dinner on the river, where Caleb was hosting potential partners from New York. Ariel wore a navy dress and the gold earrings her mother had given her, simple but beautiful. She arrived early, reviewed Caleb's talking points, fixed 2 weak slides on his tablet, and told herself the night would be fine. Then she walked into the private dining room and saw Sloan sitting beside Caleb. Caleb looked up and smiled like nothing was wrong. "Ariel, there you are? We saved you a spot." The spot was at the far end, near the swinging kitchen door. Heat rushed into Ariel's face, but she walked to the chair and sat down. Halfway through dinner, one of the partners turned to her. "So, Ariel, what is your role with Whitmore?" For one small second, she hoped Caleb would finally say it. "Strategist. Builder. The person who helped shape the company when nobody believed in it." Instead, Caleb dabbed his mouth with a napkin and said, "Ariel helped at home so I could stay focused." That mattered too. The table gave polite nods, the kind people offer when they think a woman has been put neatly in her place. Sloan lifted her wineglass and smiled. "Support is beautiful. Not everyone is built for the front line." Ariel's hand tightened around her water glass. Her throat went dry. She could hear the river outside, the low hum of conversation. Caleb moving on to the next topic as if he had not just erased years of her life in one sentence. She did not cry. She did not argue. She only looked at Caleb and understood something with painful clarity. He was not failing to see her. He was choosing not to. That night, while Caleb stayed out celebrating with Sloan and the partners, Ariel sat alone at the kitchen island in their penthouse. The city lights blinked against the windows. Her laptop opened. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before she typed 3 words into the search bar. Intellectual property attorney. By the next morning, Ariel had not slept. The kitchen island was covered with old notebooks, printed emails, meeting notes, and the kind of documents a woman saves when part of her already knows love is no longer enough. She had spent the night reading, not crying. Every few minutes, her eyes would burn and her chest would tighten, but she kept going, because pain had become less frightening than staying blind. At 9:15, an attorney named Denise Caldwell called her back. Her voice was calm, direct, and practical in a way Ariel desperately needed. "Do not take company property that does not belong to you," Denise said. "But anything you created, anything sent to you, anything showing your work, your authorship, your unpaid consulting, your original drafts, preserve it. Do not argue with him. Do not warn him. Do not give him time to clean the record." Ariel sat very still, one hand wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. "So I am not crazy," she whispered. Denise paused. "No, Mrs. Whitmore. You are not crazy. You are late. But you are not crazy." That sentence almost broke her. Not because it was cruel, but because it was the first honest thing anyone had said to her in months. Ariel looked around the penthouse Caleb loved to show off. The white marble counters, the leather chairs, the river view, the art chosen by a designer who had never asked what Ariel liked. For years, she had mistaken expensive things for a life. Now the whole place felt staged, like a hotel room where she had overstayed. Around noon, Caleb came home to change before another investor event. He walked in on a phone call, laughing, his suit jacket over one shoulder. He barely noticed the papers on the island. "You are still upset about dinner?" he asked, covering the phone for half a second. Ariel looked at him, really looked at him. The man she had loved, the man she had built beside, the man who had learned how to step over her without looking down. "Did you ever see me as your partner?" she asked. Caleb sighed, already checking his watch. "Ariel, not this again. It is a simple question." He rubbed his forehead like she was giving him a headache. "You are my wife. That should mean more than some title." Her fingers tightened against the edge of the counter. "That is not what I asked." His phone buzzed again. Sloan's name lit up the screen. Caleb glanced at it, then toward the door. "I have real problems to handle tonight. We can talk when you are less emotional." He left before she answered. The door clicked shut behind him, soft and final. Ariel stood there for a long time, listening to the quiet he had left behind. Then she moved. Not fast, not frantic. Carefully. She packed one suitcase with clothes, her mother's earrings, 2 framed photographs from before Caleb became someone she had to explain to herself, and the old silver laptop he used to mock for being slow. She copied her files onto a black hard drive. She printed the divorce papers Denise had sent over and signed her name with a hand that trembled only once. At 10:38 that night, she placed her wedding ring on the kitchen island. The circle looked smaller than she remembered, almost harmless. Then she wrote Caleb one message. "I'm leaving tonight. Goodbye, Caleb." She waited for the little word that would tell her he had seen it. Nothing. No reply. No call. No sudden rush of regret. Somewhere across the city, he was probably smiling under soft lights, letting Sloan tell him he was brilliant. Ariel closed her phone and slipped it into her coat pocket. When she stepped into the hallway with her suitcase, she did not look back at the penthouse. She had spent years looking back, years hoping Caleb would turn around and finally see her. But that night, as the elevator doors opened, Ariel Brooks chose herself without asking him to understand why. And while Caleb was raising a glass to the future he thought he had secured, the woman he had erased was walking out with the truth he forgot to hide. For the first few weeks after Ariel left Chicago, nobody saw a powerful woman rising. They saw a woman sleeping on her cousin's pull-out sofa in Atlanta, wearing the same gray sweatshirt 3 days in a row, pretending she was fine when her hands still shook every time an email from Caleb's attorney hit her inbox. She had not taken the penthouse, the car, or the designer furniture people assumed a CEO's wife would fight for. She took her laptop, her files, her mother's earrings, and enough pride to keep breathing when the nights got quiet. During the day, she answered consulting calls from a folding table in the corner of her cousin Tasha's dining room. At night, she lay awake listening to traffic on Peachtree Street, wondering how a marriage could make a woman feel lonely, then somehow leaving it could feel even lonelier. Caleb did not call to ask if she was safe. He did not ask where she slept. The only messages that came from his side were clean, expensive sentences written by lawyers. Please direct all future communication through counsel. Please return any materials belonging to Whitmore Systems. Please refrain from making false claims regarding company development. Ariel read that last one twice. Then she laughed, but there was no humor in it. False claims, she whispered to the empty room. That is what he calls my life now. Some mornings, she hated herself for still checking her phone. Not because she wanted him back, not exactly, but because some bruised part of her wanted proof that he had finally understood. That he had walked into the kitchen, seen the ring, opened the hard drive, and felt even one honest second of regret. But regret did not come. So Ariel stopped waiting for it. She started taking small contracts from local businesses that could barely afford big firms. A bakery trying to manage wholesale orders. A family-owned trucking company drowning in late deliveries. A medical supply startup losing customers because their system treated every order like a spreadsheet instead of a promise. Ariel listened to them the way nobody at Whitmore had listened to her. She heard the frustration in their voices, the exhaustion behind the polite emails, the fear small owners carried when one mistake could cost them a month of rent. Slowly, a question began to form in her mind. What would she build if she was not building for Caleb anymore? The answer came at 2:12 in the morning on a rainy Thursday, written across a yellow legal pad beside a cup of gas station coffee. Brooks Meridian, a logistics platform made for the companies Caleb had always dismissed as too small, too messy, too ordinary. Ariel did not have a fancy office. She did not have a public relations team. She had her old laptop, a cheap desk from a thrift store, and a kind of focus that comes when a woman finally stops asking to be valued by people who benefited from undervaluing her. 3 months later, she pitched the idea to Marcus Bell, a quiet angel investor Tasha knew from a small business conference. He was in his 60s, with silver glasses, a worn leather notebook, and the patience of a man who had watched loud founders fail and quiet builders change industries. He listened for 40 minutes without interrupting. When Ariel finished, her palms were damp under the table. Marcus looked at the prototype on her screen, then at her. This does not sound like revenge, he said. Ariel swallowed. It is not. He nodded. Good. Revenge burns fast. This looks like something that can last. For the first time in months, Ariel felt her shoulders drop. Not because someone had saved her, but because someone had finally seen the work without asking which man stood behind it. When Marcus slid the seed investment offer across the table, her hand trembled before she picked up the pen. She thought about the divorce papers, the wedding ring, the note Caleb had ignored. Then she signed her name. This time, the signature did not end a life she had built around someone else. It opened the door to one that belonged to her. By the time Brooks Meridian signed its 15th client, Caleb Whitmore was still telling himself the market was having a bad quarter. That was easier than admitting the problem had a name. In Chicago, Whitmore Systems looked as polished as ever from the outside. The lobby still smelled like fresh coffee and expensive wood. The company logo still glowed behind the reception desk. Sloan still walked through the halls like every glass wall belonged to her. But inside the conference rooms, the numbers had started to rot. Small and mid-sized clients were leaving first, the ones Caleb used to call maintenance accounts, as if their money mattered less because they did not arrive with headlines. Customer support tickets were piling up. Sales calls were turning tense. Renewals that used to be automatic were now coming back with polite rejections. Caleb sat at the head of the boardroom table one gray Monday morning, jaw tight, while his chief financial officer, Martin Hale, slid a report across the glass. "We lost 3 more accounts last week," Martin said. Caleb did not pick up the report. "Then sales needs to stop making excuses." Martin took a careful breath. "Sales is not the only issue." Sloan crossed one leg over the other, her tablet resting on her knee. "This is a perception problem. The brand needs a stronger confidence campaign." Martin looked at her, then back at Caleb. "It is not perception when clients are canceling contracts." Caleb finally grabbed the report. "Who are they going to?" The room got quiet in that strange way rooms do when everyone knows the answer, but nobody wants to be the first to say it. Martin adjusted his glasses. "A newer platform. Atlanta-based. Brooks Meridian." Caleb's eyes stopped moving. For a second, the only sound was the low hum of the heating system. "Brooks?" he said. "As in Ariel Brooks." A junior director near the far end of the table shifted in her chair. "Yes, she is the founder." Sloan gave a short laugh, too quick and too sharp. "Ariel runs a software company now." Nobody laughed with her. Caleb leaned back, trying to make his face unreadable, but his hand tightened around the edge of the report. "My ex-wife had some consulting clients. That is not a company." Martin turned another page toward him. "It is now? Their retention rate is 96%. Their onboarding time is half of ours. Clients keep mentioning that their system feels built for real operations, not just executive dashboards." The words landed harder than Caleb wanted to show. Real operations. That had always been Ariel's language. He could hear her voice from years ago at their kitchen table, patient but firm, telling him that numbers did not mean anything if the people using the product felt ignored. Back then, he had called it overthinking. Now clients were paying her for it. Caleb stood, walked to the window, and looked down at the river cutting through downtown Chicago. He told himself he was angry because she had taken business from him. But beneath the anger was something colder. A memory of the hard drive. A folder with her name on it. A truth he had closed his laptop on because facing it would have meant facing himself. "Find out who is funding her," he said. Martin hesitated. "Caleb, maybe we should consider reaching out professionally. There may be room to settle old concerns before this becomes public." Caleb turned around. "There are no old concerns." The lie sounded thin even to him. Sloan stood and placed a hand on the back of his chair, smiling like she could still smooth the room into obedience. "We can position her as a small player copying your vision." The junior director looked down at her notes, then quietly said, "With respect, the clients do not think she is copying us. They think she fixed what we stopped caring about." Nobody moved. Caleb stared at the young woman until she lowered her eyes, but the damage was already done. For the first time, Ariel's name was not being whispered as his ex-wife. It was being spoken as a threat. And somewhere in Atlanta, in a modest office with second-hand desks and a team that actually listened when she spoke, Ariel Brooks was not thinking about Caleb at all. She was reviewing the next contract, circling a pricing note in blue ink, and building the kind of company he once believed only he deserved to own. The Miami Tech Growth Summit was supposed to be Caleb's comeback. Sloan had spent 3 weeks shaping the story around him, choosing the Navy's suit, approving the photos, rewriting his opening line until it sounded humble without actually admitting fault. By the time Caleb stepped into the convention center that morning, the Atlantic sun pouring through the tall glass walls, he looked exactly like the man investors used to trust. Calm, expensive, untouched. Cameras clicked near the entrance. Founders shook hands over paper cups of coffee. Screens flashed company logos in bright blue and white. Caleb walked through it all with Sloan at his side, pretending he did not notice the way people lowered their voices when he passed. "Keep your shoulders relaxed," Sloan murmured, smiling for a photographer. "You are still the room." Caleb gave a tight nod. He wanted to believe her. On the main stage, he delivered his speech about leadership, loyalty, and building technology that lasted. The words sounded strong enough. He even got applause. But as he stepped down, Martin Hale caught up to him near the side aisle, phone in hand, his face pale in a way Caleb did not like. "What is it now?" Caleb asked. Martin looked toward the stage. "You should see the next speaker." Caleb followed his eyes to the massive screen above the auditorium. The name appeared in clean white letters, simple and impossible to ignore. Ariel Brooks, founder and chief executive officer, Brooks Meridian. For 1 second, Caleb felt the room tilt. Not visibly, not enough for anyone else to notice. But inside him, something dropped. Sloan's smile froze. They invited her here? Caleb did not answer. The lights dimmed, the music shifted, and Ariel walked onto the stage. No diamonds. No dramatic entrance. No attempt to look like someone proving a point. She wore a tailored black suit, soft gold earrings, and her natural curls pulled back from her face. She looked steady, which somehow felt worse than if she had looked angry. Caleb had seen her cry in their kitchen. He had seen her tired, barefoot, holding cold coffee and fixing his slides at midnight. He had never seen her like this, standing in front of 1,200 people while the room leaned forward to hear what she would say. Ariel rested her hands lightly on the podium and smiled. "Good afternoon. I want to talk about what happens when companies forget the people who actually use what they build." A quiet ripple moved through the audience. Caleb's jaw tightened. Sloan whispered, "That was unnecessary." But Ariel did not look at them. Not once. She spoke about small businesses, warehouse managers, dispatch teams, family-owned suppliers, and owners who could not afford software that treated them like an afterthought. Her slides were clean. Her numbers were sharp. Her voice never shook. Every story had weight because it came from listening, not pretending. At one point, she showed a case study from a trucking company in Georgia that had cut delivery delays by 40% using Brooks Meridian. The applause came before she even finished the sentence. Caleb sat in the third row, hands folded, feeling every clap like a door closing. He remembered mocking those customers as too small. He remembered Ariel telling him they were the market everyone else was ignoring. He remembered dismissing her with a wave of his hand. Now the whole room was paying to hear her say what he had refused to hear for free. When the moderator asked what made Brooks Meridian different, Ariel paused. "We do not build from ego," she said. "We build from what people actually need." Caleb looked down. For the first time, he was not thinking about how to beat her. He was thinking about how long she had been right. When Ariel left the stage, the audience rose to its feet. She stepped down into the aisle as people gathered around her, offering cards, questions, invitations. Caleb stood near the wall, waiting for her to glance his way. She did not. She passed within 20 feet of him, close enough for him to see the calm in her face, and kept walking toward a private investor room at the end of the hall. Marcus Bell was waiting by the door. He opened it for her, and before she went inside, Caleb saw Martin standing there too, holding a folder he had not shown him. That was when Caleb understood the speech was not the worst part of the day. It was only the polite part. The private investor room was colder than the auditorium, all white walls, bottled water, and a long glass table that reflected every face around it. Caleb stepped inside with Sloan close behind him, expecting a quick meeting to steady nervous investors and pull the day back under his control. Instead, he saw Ariel seated across from Marcus Bell, calm as morning coffee. Martin stood near the screen with a folder tucked under one arm, avoiding Caleb's eyes. 3 Whitmore investors sat along the table, not smiling, not chatting, not performing the polite warmth people used when money was still safe. Caleb stopped at the doorway. "What is this?" Marcus folded his hands. "A conversation that should have happened before today." Caleb gave a tight laugh and looked at Martin. "You arranged this without telling me?" Martin swallowed. "They requested documentation. I had a responsibility to provide it." Sloan stepped forward with her polished smile, the one she used when a room needed softening. "I think we should be careful not to confuse a personal history with a business discussion." Ariel looked at her for the first time. Not angry, not shaken, just tired of the performance. "That is exactly why I brought documents." Her attorney, Denise Caldwell, opened a slim black folder and slid copies across the table. No dramatic speech, no raised voice, just paper moving from one side of the room to the other, quiet enough to make Caleb hear his own breathing. The first page was an email from 6 years earlier, Caleb writing, "Your growth framework saved us. I owe you more than dinner." The second was a draft of the original operating model, created under Ariel's name before Whitmore Systems ever had a legal product launch. The third showed revisions, timestamps, client notes, and internal messages where Caleb had asked her to clean up the system before the investors see it. One investor, a woman named Patricia Lowe, removed her glasses and looked at Caleb. "Were these materials included in your founder disclosure?" Caleb's mouth opened, then closed. He glanced at Sloan, but Sloan was looking down at the table. Ariel sat with her hands folded, feeling the old ache rise in her chest, the one that used to make her want to explain herself until someone believed her. This time, she did not chase belief. She let the record speak. Denise continued. "Mrs. Brooks is not claiming ownership over Whitmore Systems as a whole. She is establishing authorship, unpaid strategic contribution, and possible misrepresentation of intellectual property used in fundraising." Caleb's face flushed. "This is ridiculous. She was my wife. We talked about work at home. Couples do that." Ariel's fingers tightened once, then relaxed. "You are right. Couples talk. But employees document. Consultants invoice. Founders disclose. You made sure I was none of those things when credit mattered, and all of them when blame became useful." The room went silent. Sloan finally spoke, her voice thinner now. "This is clearly emotional." Patricia turned to her. "No. This is risk." Another investor pushed the folder away like it had become hot. "We cannot move forward with the funding round until this is reviewed." Caleb stared at the papers, and for the first time, he did not see a bitter ex-wife. He saw the woman who had built the floor beneath him while he practiced standing tall. Ariel rose from her chair. She did not smile. She did not ask for an apology. "I am not here to destroy what I helped build," she said. "I am here to stop letting you call it yours alone." Then she walked out with Denise and Marcus, leaving Caleb in the cold glass room with the investors, the silence, and every truth he had mistaken for loyalty. He had always thought Ariel's quiet meant she had nothing left to say. Now he understood she had been saving the words for people who could finally make them matter. 3 months after the Miami summit, Whitmore Systems no longer looked untouchable. The funding round collapsed first, quietly, with emails full of phrases like reassessment period and strategic concerns. Then came the board meeting Caleb had always believed would never happen without his permission. He sat at the same glass table where people once praised his instincts, listening as Patricia Lowe explained that the company needed new leadership to restore trust. The words were clean, almost kind. That made them worse. Caleb did not shout. Pride would not let him. He only stared at the folder in front of him and realized, too late, that his name had been printed on top of a company built from pieces of a woman he had taught himself to overlook. Sloan lasted 2 more weeks. She called it a brand transition when she left, but everyone knew she was simply moving toward brighter lights. The day her office was cleared, Caleb stood by the window and watched rain streak down the glass. For years, he had confused attention with loyalty. Now the room was quiet enough for him to hear the difference. In Atlanta, Brooks Meridian moved into a real office, not flashy, not cold, just alive. Second-hand desks sat beside new ones. Someone always forgot to refill the coffee. A young engineer kept a sticky note on her monitor that said, "Build what people actually need." Ariel noticed it one morning and had to look away for a second because the words touched a place in her she had once kept hidden. Her company signed its first national contract with a chain of family-owned supply warehouses across the Southeast. No champagne tower. No staged celebration. Just her team gathered around a conference table with grocery store cupcakes, laughing too loudly because nobody knew what else to do with joy that big. Marcus Bell lifted a paper cup of coffee. To building something that lasts. Ariel smiled. To not doing it alone. Later that evening, when the office had emptied and the Atlanta skyline softened into gold outside the windows, Ariel opened her laptop and saw an email from Caleb. No attorney copied. No formal subject line. Just his name. She sat still for a moment before opening it. "Ariel, I know this does not fix anything. I know I am late. But I need to say it. I did not understand how much of my life was built by your hands. I called your work support because admitting the truth would have made me smaller. You deserved better from me." Ariel read it twice. Her chest tightened, but not with the old hope. That woman, the one who would have cried over those words and called them love, had survived long enough to become someone else. She closed the laptop gently. She did not reply that night. Maybe she never would. Some apologies arrive after the door has already taught you how to stay closed. She walked to the glass wall and looked out at the city. Below, cars moved like tiny lights through the evening traffic. Somewhere in Chicago, Caleb was finally meeting the emptiness he had once left for her. And Ariel, for the first time in years, did not need him to suffer in order for her to feel whole. That was the part nobody tells you about real power. It is not making someone regret losing you. It is reaching a morning where their regret no longer decides your worth. Caleb had ignored her when she was leaving because he thought her silence meant she had nowhere to go. But silence is not always surrender. Sometimes it is a woman gathering her name, her work, her dignity, and walking toward a life loud enough to speak for itself.